it was a cautionary tale that I wanted to tell, and I wanted to focus tightly on the people who fight in that battle, not the policymakers who move the pieces, right? Because wars aren't fought by the policymakers; they're fought by the desperate and disillusioned, mostly.
Okay, before I introduce you all to who Zac Topping is, before you hear from him and his voice and so many new things for the Ivory Tower Boiler Room here, this is the first time I interview a dystopian writer, a war novelist, a military veteran. So there's so much that I cover with Zac. I want to let you all know I am going to leave you on the edge of your seats at the end of this episode. So you have been warned that there is a bonus episode only available to the ITBR Cafe, that's the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe Patreon members. And I say to Zac innocently, oh, do you have another 10 minutes? Well, those 10 minutes actually turn into 44 minutes. So there is another entire episode available to you all. So if you want to listen to this episode first on the podcast and then go over to our Patreon, feel free to do that, or pause right now and just head to our Patreon because the full video interview is up there, the whole hour and 40 minutes. So patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. How much do you have to pay? You're probably wondering. Okay, well, it's like you're paying me for a coffee. So thank you. It is $5. I appreciate it. I appreciate you all sending money towards my coffee fund. And I'm joking, but I need a lot of caffeine when I'm editing these podcasts. But you also are contributing to events that we do here. And speaking of events, we have a Real Housewives trivia event on February 9th at 7 p.m. in Port Jefferson, Long Island at Burrito, which is an authentic Mexican restaurant. Tickets are $20. DM at Ivory Tower Boiler Room on Instagram to reserve your spot. So yeah, can't wait to see some of you there. And all of the Patreon money, it goes to just allowing us to continue this vision here of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, to have these public humanities discussions. And yeah, I always appreciate a coffee or two. Thank you all. And without further ado, here is Zac Topping. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I was going to say happy. I am happy to have this guest on today, but we're going to talk about all things dystopian fiction meets war novels. He's classified it as a near dystopian, so we'll get into that. But I want to introduce who I'm with, which is Zac Topping. I didn't even ask if that's how he pronounces his last name,
Yep.
but I'm assuming just phonetically. A topping on this interview. So Zac grew up, and I already joked with him about this because I find it so funny being on Long Island interviewing him. Grew up in Eastern Connecticut, where, contrary to popular belief, it's not all trust funds and yacht clubs. He spent his formative years on the move, and discovered a passion for writing early in life. He is a veteran of the United States Army and has served 2 tours in Iraq, and he currently lives with his wife in a quiet farm town in Connecticut, where he works as a career firefighter. So, such an interesting bio. First, I, want to thank Zac for your service. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And yeah, welcome. I mean,
Thank you.
this is going to
Yeah,
be
thanks for
such,
having me. I'm thrilled to
of
be
course.
here.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea where we might go with our talking points, which we have, but I know there's going to be a lot that Zac is going to bring up that I'm not ready for, which I'm happy about. But right away, I mean, um, where did this inspiration for you to actually write a fictional novel, all about dystopia, war? I'm assuming this took a little while to formulate in your mind.
Yeah, it did. Well, when I first started writing, I wrote a lot of. I knew I was going to write sci-fi or fantasy somewhere in the genre fiction realm because that's kind of where I've always been drawn to. So my earliest introductions to that was like Michael Crichton and J.R. Tolkien and George R. R. Martin, things like that, Richard Morgan, and I wrote a lot of that like fantasy and much more sci-fi type stories to start when I was kind of learning how to write and getting, practicing just doing it for fun. And the idea for Wake of War actually came about when I was brainstorming the world building for another story. So I was doing a little bit of back building and thinking about like, well, how did the world get this way, get that way? And then it just clicked. I was like, wait a minute, that's a whole story in itself. And it's almost like it was perfect. Like that was a story I was meant to write, having served in the military and spent some time overseas. I figured that in itself would lend a bit of authenticity to the story. And as soon as I had that idea, it was like from concept to outline to finish first draft was about 9 months. So it actually went
Oh,
pretty
wow.
quick,
It's quick.
pretty
Yeah.
quick. It was, I wrote that all happened in 2017. So,
Okay.
and the book just came out this year, 2022. And, being a near future military dystopian, story about a second American Civil War, it's just pure, terrible coincidence that it became so timely and almost prescient. It wasn't meant to be that way, and it wasn't meant to come out as sort of like capitalizing on the turmoil that we're suffering right now. But it was a cautionary tale that I wanted to tell, and I wanted to focus tightly on the people who fight in that battle, not the policymakers who move the pieces, right? Because wars aren't fought by the policymakers; they're fought by the desperate and disillusioned mostly. So that's why the book is very grounded on the characters' viewpoints there, and sort of just kind of, it all just kind of came out.
Yeah, I mean, no, thanks for laying it out because especially what you're saying about that disillusionment, that happens in war. I mean, again, this is just me speculating about what I've seen in or even heard. I like Paul Rykoff a lot. I don't know if you know who that is, but he has this podcast that is really interesting about like the middle ground, or I don't think that's what it's he always says look out for the helpers, and like he served
Hmm.
in the military, and like he always says that there's those in policy and those in the government, there's a lot of skepticism from those who serve in the military about how these chess pieces are moving.
Hmm.
That, something even about your novel and you having served, do you feel like politics gets placed on you, like where you have to choose a side of you're either on this side of a political party or that side? Because I feel like if you serve in the military, sometimes you can be like torn into like, okay, well, who do you like? Which political party are you more aligned with? And like, do you ever talk about that in the military?
That's a really interesting question because one of the things I want to focus on the book, I think I tried a little bit was, um, I couldn't tell you what it's like now, what the climate's like now.
Mhm.
I left the military in 2007, so like a gazillion years ago. And but when I was in, I joined in 2002, so that was the George Bush era, and the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. There was obviously a lot of contention as to what we we're doing there, or at least in Iraq. I think on the periphery, we were vaguely aware that because I went to Iraq twice, and which post 9/11 brought us to Afghanistan, and while we were all in the fervor and excited about war and waving the flags, we somehow ended up in Iraq. We were all aware that that was sort of like, wait, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. But you know what? When you're there and you're in the trenches and you wake up in the morning, the only thing that matters is getting through the day and into the next day, protecting yourself and the men and women next to you. So politics wasn't really a talk. And if it was just a dismissive, comment or something like, move on. Yeah, it's for the thinkers. We're here doing stuff. It's not time for that right now.
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrew. So I interrupt this podcast interview because when I'm not podcasting, I'm usually writing my queer scholarship, or I'm teaching in a classroom, or I'm just doing other queer male scholarship activities. So I want to talk about a company that I truly love and that I've used in my own classroom. It's Broadview Press, which is an independent academic publisher in the humanities that produces high quality, pedagogically useful books for use in university and college classrooms. And I'm really excited because they are offering an exclusive 20% off of all of their books if you use the code Ivory Tower. So that includes new literary anthologies, classic literature books, anything on their website. And just to give you a taste, every season here on the podcast, I always interview a Broadview Press author. So in the fall, it was Anne Stevens who wrote the book Literary Theory and Criticism. And we actually play a Wizard of Oz game with her at the end of the episode, where I ask her to go through all of the different literary theories, from psychoanalytic Freudian theory to Marxist theory to feminist to queer theory, and ask her how she would approach the Wizard of Oz with that specific literary lens. And she does it. So thanks to Anne, but her book, Literary Theory and Criticism, is so intriguing for either your students who you're teaching literary theory to, or if you're just a lover of literature and you want to learn more about literary theories and how to apply them to your own reading, your even love of film and television. It's such a great text. And also coming up in the winter season, we are going to have Jeffrey Weinstock, who wrote the book Pop Culture for Beginners, which actually is the first book ever that Broadview published that gives you a language around how to analyze pop culture. And for everyone here, you know that I love my Real Housewives and my reality TV. So again, Broadview Press, they're giving you 20% off site-wide with the code Ivory Tower. So please head over to Broadview Press. You're not going to be disappointed. They offer everything for either the professor in your life, the student in your life, or that literary enthusiast. Okay, enjoy your reading, everyone.
Because what good is dwelling on what does it matter if I believe in what we're doing? I raise my right hand and I'll have to follow the orders. Now I'm there. So it was very interesting. I can't imagine what it'd be like now. I'm sure. I don't know. I'd just be guessing because I don't know anybody who's in the army or in the military right now. But it seems that politics and the things that were used to be kind of taboo to talk about in public spaces are much more commonplace now, even if it causes tension, in division. So I don't know. I don't know what it's like now, but that's what it was back then. And I tried to get that across in the book with the characters who are aware, that there are politics in place that presented the situation, that made the situation they're in. But as far
there's
as
a lot of ethical dilemmas that Zac deals with, and I feel your novel just does such a great job of, well, I should spell it out for the audience, which is there's these two sides of the narrative. And I think that's so masterful that you have Trent on one side fighting, and it's all domestic war, right? So you have a United States ish. It feels like the United States. I mean, it feels more like the United States, in my opinion, than The Handmaid's Tale feels. That where everything is kind of completely um Gilead
Further
is now
down the
just
road.
serving as, yeah, this
Mhm.
moniker that everything is basically the safe haven is Canada. Um, but like we're thrown into Salt Lake City or like Utah, which is very interesting. And right, the leader of the rebellion, well, I don't know, is he part of the rebellion or is he actually the dictator who overthrew the current
He
US government?
so the rebel faction in the book is called the Revolutionist Front, and it's one of several that are sprouting up across the country. And part of the world building, figuring, like the plotting I did and trying to figure out how logistically a second American Civil War would happen without like going into the details, because the book isn't a step by step, anarchist daydream. It's very
Mhm.
focused on the people. Um, but it's not as simple as, I mean, not that the first Civil War was simple, but there was the Mason-Dixon line. There was a North versus South. Now, like everything's so spread out and so interconnected. You got family on different sides of the country in different places. It would sort of just fester everywhere. So there's different rebel factions kind of popping up all over, and they just happen to be the ones that take place in Nevada and Salt Lake area and occupy the mountains around the Salt Lake Valley. But yeah, if you're referring to the character
So
Joseph
Joseph
Graham,
Graham. Yeah.
yeah, he is the charismatic, and as I think they describe in the book, the charismatic and psychotic cult leader of this rebel faction, and he is very good at getting people to believe what he wants them to believe in order to do things he wants them to do. So
Yeah. Well, and I think, like you said, it wasn't planned that your book was came out after January 6th, and
yeah,
a lot of things that have happened, including a mass epidemic of school shootings. And I mean, a lot is
yeah,
happening in the
yeah.
country. Um, and but I think it's so intriguing that like you really have us think in this novel, which is why I really, when I started to read the synopsis and then I started to dive into your novel, I was surprised with, like you're talking about, just these factions of revolutionary moments and movements that it's there isn't a huge consensus. Like you could be in one community,
Hmm.
and we're seeing this now in real life, which is um a standoff, like hopefully not to what happens in this dystopian world, but just standoffs of ideas. Like just because one might be falling for, say, a cult thinking, you're gonna have others who counter that.
Right.
So, and that's in one town. Like I
Mhm.
don't think that we're not in a society right now where one town believes in the same political party thinking. And yeah, it makes for a really interesting like you said, you thought about the Second American Civil War, which I mean, was that really just tapped into um well, how much of that was involved with you serving and how much of that is just you just being a political almost analyst or thinking about what was going on in society? I mean, maybe you can't split them, but
I did that was very much more me having served and trying to explore some of those ideas and things. And I'm not a political junkie. I consider myself an average guy of average intelligence with like an average understanding of what's going on around me. I do my best to keep up, but it's a whirlwind sometimes. So um I remember watching, there's a documentary on Netflix called Winter on Fire, and it came out, I don't know, 2016, 2017. And it was about the riots in Ukraine in end of 2013 into 2014, when they were originally the country was about on the eve of signing an agreement to join the European Union. The president met with Putin behind closed doors and backed out of the deal, and the protests in Maidan Square, which turned into violent riots, and the Maidan Revolution. And it's a brutal, heartbreaking film. It's incredibly important to watch. It's it's hard to watch now after we see what happened and where the eventuality was. You see these people struggling for independence or freedom, to move forward in the world, to be in a position of safety, security. And I remember thinking, wow, man, thank God that's on the other side of the world. That's imagine if that was here. Like, you see, Ukraine or Syria, or, I mean, throw a dart at the map, and there are places in the world where people have to really struggle every single day. And then you think here, like, oh, that can't happen, or it shouldn't happen. And there are people who, misguided people who almost look forward to that because they don't truly understand what it would really mean if conflict like that broke out here, and what we would be putting on our future, children and friends and family and loved ones. And I wanted to use, some of my own experiences and observations and things that I learned about conflict, and then put it in a frighteningly plausible and close setting to really do the themes justice, and I think that was kind of the point. The politics there were just enough politics to make it a believable scenario. Because in 2017, I remember the idea of a second American Civil War seemed far-fetched. I was like, I don't know how anyone's going to buy into this, because there's bills and statutes and policies in place to prevent the president from activating active duty military on U.S. soil, and blah, blah, blah. And now, I mean, you turn on the news and we hear the term Civil War like on a daily basis. It's insane. And maybe it's important.
I mean, I hear it at
Ral.
I've heard it at, I don't like to say the name, but that's my own thing. Just because I feel like if I invoke the name, there's gonna be both sides reacting. But I think we all know when I say rally, it like takes a new term now. But there'll be those interviewed, and I'll catch an interview just on the news once in a while, and the Civil War is invoked all the time by them. Like, oh, they're like, do you think we're headed to another Civil War? And they'll say just straight faced, oh yes, it's happening. And you're right. A few years ago, that was people thought, oh, that could never happen. Like, or even what does that mean? Right. But I still think what gives me comfort is when I read your novel, it still is escapist, which is a good sign, in a sense of, okay, well, there are elements here that make it this dystopic future, or not even future, but this dystopic war element that we're not seeing, thankfully, on American soil. But something you brought up is, I really feel that the theme of empathy is something that I always wrestle with when it comes to even a war film or a war novel. Like, I'm reluctant to watch war films usually because I'm concerned about just like, how is the body going to be displayed? Like, how much gore, like what kind of tale is going to be told? And that's why I really like where you go in your novel, because I think that imaginative power is different than what happens in a film. So like, I was just curious, do you yourself watch quote unquote war films, which I'm not sure how to define that, but
yeah.
I
mean, I do. And there are, there's escapist, action movie fun, right? You got your typical thrillers, and, and then you've got things that take a little bit more serious approach, or look at things, they're telling a different story. So, I'm a big fan, believe it or not, I am a big fan of reading traditional military thrillers, like Mark Rainey's Gray Man series, and Greg Hurwitz's Orphan X, the lone wolf, security operator running around doing things. But I know what those are when I'm reading them. Or, that movie just came out, The Gray Man. And then there's a film that I always recommend every time I get to talk about it, is Waltz with Bashir. It's about the war in Lebanon in the 80s. And the director was he's a documentary filmmaker. He served in that conflict, and the film is about him trying to find out why he has gaps in his memory about it, and it's incredibly powerful. It's a totally different story than that escapist stuff.
Hi, it's Mary from True Crime and Academia.
You've heard me talk about my amazing friend Mandy before. She makes the best crochet, pre-cut, and custom home decor for reasonable prices. If you're looking for a one-of-a-kind gift or some new decor to add some new life into your home, look no further. Mandy has got you. I have quite a few items from her, ranging from a crocheted headband to Halloween decor items to my amazing and adorable Coraline ornament. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm like obsessed with Coraline, and I just love how Mandy makes it. She's also made me a Coraline doll that sits next to all of my true crime books. To order, just slide in her DMs on Facebook and Instagram at Mandy Made It. That's MANDEE Made It on Facebook and Instagram. Once again, go to Mandy Made It on Facebook and Instagram, send her a DM, and order today.
And for Wake of War, it just, because of the nature of the book and what we're trying to say, it's a cautionary tale. You should, I like you said, it hasn't happened yet. So thank God, I hope it doesn't happen. And the whole point of writing this story is so that we could look at it and go, if like, you see someone at one of these rallies, oh yeah, it's a next Civil War, bring it on. They're ready to go run out in the streets thinking they're going to play, it's going to be like The Walking Dead and they can wear all their costumes. No, it's going to be horrible. It would be absolutely horrible. And hopefully, we can use things like almost like the ghost of Christmas future, look into the future. If we continue down this path, this is where we're going to go. And that was what I was doing with Wake of War. But I do watch military films. I don't I don't watch them exclusively. I don't sit there, and I'm usually with a hypercritical eye, that's inaccurate. That's not accurate. If they glorify stuff or things are too gratuitous, then you kind of lose me. But yeah, I don't really shy away from it either.
Yeah, well, you'll have to recommend some, like you've recommended one already that I need to look into. Because I think when I think war films, I'm thinking more of those I don't know, one has to come to my mind. The one that Harry Styles was in. I forget what that was called. But I think it had just come out maybe a year ago. But it was a British army. I don't know if it was a World War One. I'm always thinking of World War II, World War One.
Like
films.
Dunkirk or
oh, there it is.
Was it Dunkirk? Was he in that one?
I think so, right? Was that a year ago?
I don't know. I don't even know what day today is. There's no, I could tell you.
Well,
maybe relative within the last couple of years. That in there's All Quiet on the Western Front is out on Netflix now too. I haven't seen that yet, but I would be happy. I do want to watch that, but we'll be watching it. Of course, it's not like, oh, let's settle in and watch a fun movie tonight. You have to kind of know what you're getting into, know what to take from it. There's something being said. And I think if you're aware that a film is trying to say something or trying to explore something, or maybe use that medium, be it a book or a film, to explore a side of the world that maybe some people never get to explore or that some people are curious about, that may be just another way to do that, to explore that facet of the human experience.
Yeah. And hopefully it doesn't seem like I'm poo-pooing. War film is such a vast genre.
No, yeah.
Right? There's the more realist, there's the psychological, like you said, there's the thriller ones. And something though that I do, because there's a lot of films that have, of course, war themes within the film. And what I desperately wanted to ask you, Zach, is I need to just pick Zach's mind of what it means about brotherhood. And I mean, there are women in the military, of course. But right, that in my mind is something that the American public, it's a word that's invoked a lot in war, is your comrade, your brother. And it does pop out to me when I read your novel is that idea of, like you said, getting through the day. And like, how are you going to get through the day with your troop? Like, you turn to them as family. They become a family unit.
Mhm.
And right, you really don't want to have contentious fights with the troop, I'm assuming. Like, you don't want, like, even though you might disagree, say, on a topic, you don't want at the end of the day for that to create this psychological wedge between you where now you can't effectively, do the task
Yeah.
and turn your back on the person. So, like, how important is that of just brotherhood, comradeship? Yeah.
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, and I see that in the fire service. I'm a career firefighter now, and we work in these tight knit groups of people with specialized skills that go into highly dangerous situations. And not to make it sound like I'm some sort of doing anything crazy, but you have to rely on the people next to you and to do what they need to do, and they need to be able to rely on you, and that in itself breeds a sort of trust that's different than you get elsewhere. Um, there'll still be fights, there'll still be contention. Families fight, siblings fight, parents and children fight, spouses fight. But that's just part of the natural process of forming relationships. If like you said, the important thing is that you could be in the middle of an argument, but when it's time to go do your job, you do your job. And sometimes maybe in the moment you don't realize it until years later. You're still, you still think about these people. You make these long lasting friendships. Um, there's something to be said about being stranded in a, dangerous, tumultuous, violent environment with a selected group of people who become your family, because your families are, on the other side of the world or another side of the country or somewhere else way beyond where you can reach them. And so there's no one, they can't reach you. So you have to kind of depend on each other. It doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't mean that just because you serve in some group like that you're going to find that, but it's definitely a common thing. And I'm sure there are far more intelligent studies on it than my incoherent ramblings here. But there's the forming the bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood in the crucible of war is something that's been it's gone on for generations. As long as human beings have been able to walk upright and pick up sticks, it's been a thing.
Well, I was gonna
Unfortunately.
say, like, something I'm noticing though is, like, I actually will see more presence of military on TikTok, like this Gen Z, or even, like, I guess my millennial uh my millennial family. Like, is social media now actually, I guess it depends, right, on your branch, but is it allowed to actually now, is it easier to connect now with people than, like, say, when you were serving without that social media presence?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Facebook, when I was in the military, during the time I was in the military, Facebook was only available to college students. It wasn't for the general public.
Mm.
And it was only on my second deployment where they opened it up to everybody, so anybody could join. And that's when I joined. And once you did that, it became incredibly easier to be in touch with people, as long as you can get to the internet cafe and have internet access.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not a huge fan of social media. I don't have TikTok. I have Twitter for now. Instagram, and I'm there, but I lurk more because I'm just so uncomfortable. And maybe that's just me being an old man, like yelling at clouds and telling people to get off my lawn, kids in their social media. But um, I mean, it's got its benefits for sure, and it's definitely easier to keep up with people. I mean, I keep up with my family through social media more than calls and text. I mean, text message, if anything, like you see your phone ring now, and you're like, "The hell are you?" Nobody calls. You wait until it goes to voicemail and text them. What do you want? But
I know, I'm so happy I have a Google phone that screens my calls. They're like,
oh,
who,
nice,
like, where it'll ask like 20 questions. I'm like, okay, now I'll accept the call. Um,
nice.
but so I guess basically my question is, it's not necessarily that they would stop you from posting on TikTok when you're deployed, or again, it
Oh,
depends on what you're doing. Like how I
man.
guess, like how, well, I guess the mission, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to be having a TikTok when you're actively doing
Yeah.
like,
See,
or
and
even
again,
have your
that's,
phone probably.
yeah. Are you, man, that's I'm so outdated. Yeah, it was not a thing when I was during my time in the military. TikTok and Twitter and Instagram did not exist. Facebook was just in its infant stages. I really don't know how they handle that now, but I mean, operational security or OPSEC is a huge priority. You spend weeks before you deploy going over that kind of stuff. What to say? What if a reporter comes up to you? What if someone asks you, what are you doing? What if your family asks you what you're doing? What if they, when you're writing, because I wrote handwritten letters in my first deployment. That's
Wow.
how long ago that one was. But yeah, I don't know. You're right though. You do see videos of people doing funny things and overseas or behind some HESCO barriers or something. They're clearly not in the United States. I don't know. There must be some sort of vetting process, but it's important to have those vents too. You have to be able to have fun. If it's all seriousness all the time, then it would go nuts. I really don't know how they do that now. That's a great question that I actually find somebody who serves or has been in
Well,
recently and ask them. Yeah.
everyone who listens to this, if there's anyone who knows that answer, put it in
Yeah.
the comments section or
Yeah, really.
yeah, put it in the comment section. That's what I love about there's actually an audience here, Zach.
All
That we're
right.
not seeing, but they're out there now.
Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll try
yeah.
try to be entertaining.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I guess now the lighthearted, let's talk about sex. I tried to think of a good pivot there.
No,
But
it's
no,
perfect.
something that though is like a scene in the novel that really stands out to me is like just I think that classic image of the USO shows or even
Mm,
but it's kind of done in a different way, like via a video streaming service. It's a little updated. Um, but there's even someone steals a picture of a man's wife, and like the whole implication is that like they're all now gonna like try to privately, jerk off to it. And I'm like, yeah, oh, okay. I guess one image is really providing uh the sexual fantasy for this moment. But it really does make you think, like you're so good at pulling back those layers of like the stakes of, oh, okay, as if they found the Playboy magazine. And, as much as I said to Zach, as much as he's comfortable to talk about this, um, but it is an element that I know so many um who think about the military, they think about, okay, you're usually without your spouse or your partner, or even if you're single, you're without dating opportunities. I guess unless your partner is enlisted with you, which I
it
guess happens,
happens.
I'm
It does
sure. And
happen.
that could
Yep.
be interesting. Um, and maybe you also meet people while you're in the military. I'm not sure how the dating goes. I know that happens. But yeah, like how is just the topic of sensuality or sex, not even sex, but just like romance and desire. It must be such an interesting blend that happens when you're in the military of connection, like
Yeah.
missing that connection too.
Yeah. I mean, you have a wide range of people coming into the military, and everybody has
Mhm.
different, perspectives on what, their life values, their morals, their goals, what they think they want to do or can't do. Um, and you've got a lot of different age groups. But when you think about the majority of people who enlist in the military, they're young 18-year-old kids, and they're whisked away from home for the first time, and they're taught to be badasses, and they're whatever, all the psychological conditioning that goes into boot camp or basic training to get you ready to get used to doing things you don't want to do, embracing an aggressive quality of character, I guess, and doing things in adverse conditions. And then you give them rifles and you send them off and do things. So That's why every military base has a town outside with strip clubs and tattoo parlors, and is sections of town that you get a pamphlet when you get to your duty station says don't go here. We've got people that watch these places, and they'll know if you go there and you can't go there, because then there are limits. But there's a wide range of things that people do, and like you said, certainly people have met overseas or in the military. People have gotten deployed. I know. Go too into it. My second deployment, there was we were originally we were an artillery unit, which is a combat arms unit, and in the early 2000s, combat arms is male only. For our second deployment, we reclassed as a convoy security unit and integrated female soldiers in with a predominantly male unit, and we spent a significant amount of time going through classes on how to behave and how to do this and how to what you can say, what you can't say, how to interact, how to respect everybody. And some people ended up in relationships, or and some people ended up in relationships where they got married, and others were more frivolous, to put it. And I think to bring it back to Wake of War, what I was kind of trying to do, for anyone who hasn't read the book but hopes to, I'll do my best to speak vaguely and not ruin anything. But there are characters that are very clearly inverse of each other, from the most basic details to the more deeper meaning. And sex can be a very personal and intimate act that strengthens mental, emotional, physical bonds between two people, or it can be incredibly impersonal, and it can serve to meet a temporary need in a moment that may or may not have detrimental effects, to the psyche and, mental, emotional well-being of a person. And it's all about the approach. It's all about the context. There's nothing wrong with, whichever path one chooses. Everybody's got their paths, and it's, this, you don't have to just, like waiting till marriage to lose your virginity, or to, like I'm only wait till the third date. Maybe some people don't want to wait for the third date. Nothing wrong with that. But in the context of the story, I tried to be very, very opposite. And I think you can, certain actions highlight certain people's perspective and trajectory, I guess, kind of look at it from that angle. But
yeah. Well, I was going to say on this podcast, this is tame. I mean, I talked about my like clothing option off Fire Island experience and like steamy gay experiences of not just myself. I talked a little about it, but I also have a little boundary when it comes to the bedroom and those discussions. But yeah, we talk about like porn in the media here. So everything you're saying, it's, there's going to be no offense. I think it's fascinating though, like why I am so enamored and in awe of what you wrote, Zach, is because if you tasked me with writing, like, okay, Andrew, you're going to be writing a military fictional account, it would instantly become like this homoerotic. It would not be considered like real, like a dystopian scenario. It would be classified more in just this very romance, something that porn studios would have a field day with. And that's not exactly what happens in the military, I know. But
who knows? Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to write the book you want to read. Write the book you want to write. And write the book you want to read. So
okay, so
fine.
Zach's giving me permission for this.
Oh yeah, right.
Homoerotic military.
Anybody
novel.
Can write whatever they want if it's in your heart.
Well, and I'm sure it exists. I know it exists. But you're telling me that there isn't this like homoerotic, like, well, like I'm sure it happens in the military, but it's not this outwardly display. LGBT stories are universal, but each one speaks to the individual heart and soul of the writer telling it. Do you have a story to tell? If so, the Gay and Lesbian Review wants to hear from you. Have you been moved by an LGBT book, film, painting, television show, or other form of media? The GNLR believes in bringing awareness to queer art and artists through reviews, commentary, and thought pieces in which the author relates their personal lives to a particular piece of art, a novel, a movie, or what have you. In addition to the articles published in the print magazine, the GNLR also publishes articles on its blog as well as personal essays on its popular Here's My Story section. This allows people like you to share their own experiences with our readers. To learn more about submitting either to the print or the online edition of the GNLR, visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org, and scroll down to the bottom of the page to find a link to their writer's guidelines. If you have any questions, email stephen.hemrick@glreview.org. The GNLR can't wait to see what you have to say. And remember that they're offering an exclusive code with the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So when you subscribe to the magazine, you'll receive a free copy with any print or digital subscription. So that's 7 issues instead of 6. Again, just visit theglreview.org and click subscribe and enter the promo code ITBR for your free issue.
So I mean, I guess I'm speaking in vague terms because I'm just one small, tiny cog in a giant machine. I can't speak for everybody, and I can't speak for even the majority of people. I do know this, that most of the lower enlisted, or the people who join the disillusioned and desperate youths who join the military, they're young, hormone fueled, creatures who are out in the world on their own. So what happened? I'm sure things happen, and people meet people, and these situations exist. I have no doubt. But I can't say, yes, this is how it is in the military. This is how it is there. That,
well, and you were
because...
also there. Sorry to jump, but you're also
No,
there.
no.
I think it's important to note when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in place.
I think it was I think it was not in place, but it was still like the stigma of being gay in the military was kind of like people still, it was like we're not allowed to, don't ask, don't tell, but it was still like people haven't gotten used to it, or I don't know if it's gotten better since. You want to hope in 20 years, but
well, because now I know, like, that's where social media, I think, has its upside, like where there'll be these open accounts of a gay military member who said he met his husband in the military. Like, these things, they happen. Well, like you're saying, there's all these arrangements that happen,
right.
But I think that this actually does lead to my next question, which is like, we've talked about brotherhood, we've talked about, okay, what do you do with these hormone induced raging youngsters? But also, isn't it true that the majority of those who enter the military, like, contrary maybe to a certain population in America's thinking, that it's actually very multiracial? I thought, like, it's those from many different races, different social classes, mostly though lower middle to like working class. And some even go in for health like for the health insurance, or for hoping that they get college funding for tuition. So yeah, I think that's important. If you could address that, Zach, about what was your experience with all those elements?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly not everybody who joins the military is desperate or destitute or in some bad way. A lot of people join because they knew from an early age that that's what they wanted to do with their life. Maybe their father or their mother or someone further down the line, in their family had served and they want to serve, or maybe they truly feel a calling to serve the country. But the military in general, its system, it's very, very good at reaching a specific audience. The recruiters have, it's very intricate tools to get your attention. Now, when I was going into my senior year of high school, I had no intention whatsoever of joining the military. In fact, the thought of it made me sick. Like, I was like, I can't imagine doing that, waking up before the sun every day and just standing at attention and, all the things that come with serving. And a friend of mine had enlisted. He joined the delayed entry program, which is a thing the military does. You can still be an active high school student and sign a form saying, a delayed entry. I will join the Army once I graduate high school. I'll graduate high school and join the Army. It's sort of like a binding contract. So you can enlist before you even graduate from high school. So
that's kids. My cousin. That's my cousin. I told Zach I have two cousins. I won't say their names just because I want to be respectful. Well, yeah, but I have two cousins who are special operations Army Rangers, and then one cousin who's much younger, second cousin, who is doing exactly what you said. Actually, he was in the ROTC, and it was kind of part of this program where when he went to college, the agreement was that then he would enlist in the Army. So I'm not sure what that's considered, but I don't think it's the delayed. Maybe it is. Like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
It was something with also getting tuition covered, and it's a type of scholarship. But yeah, like you're saying, you can make the decision in high school to then go into the military while you're still in high school. Right? I don't want to cut off your point.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. My point is they have a lot of incentives. There are a lot of incentives for anything. Like you mentioned, healthcare or citizenship, or, just the amount of money you make. When you get deployed overseas, you get your pay is tax-free. So you don't get taxed on a year's worth of however much pay you get. Then you get hazard duty pay on top of that. Then if you're married, you get separation pay, which, believe it or not, is a huge motivator for young kids who are about to get deployed to go marry their high school girlfriend or marry the first person they can find, because then you get more money, which is the absolute worst reason to, marry somebody, but it happens. And it's all based on the incentive to get people to come in and listen and hear what they have to say. So and my friend had joined, and he would go, I'd hang out with him after school, and he's like, I got to stop by the recruiter's office real quick. And I would go with him just because I was hanging out with him. I had no desire to hear them, but you do that enough, the recruiter starts pouring honey in your ear. And this was, like I said, 2001. So 9/11 it had just happened. And the recruiter had me convinced that the Army was nothing but a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They're going to pay for your college. You get tons of money. The odds of actually going overseas are super low, bro. You'll be fine. You hang out at the motor pool all day, and you hit the gym at night, and then you go out to the clubs. Dude, it's the best gig in the world. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker because they know what they're doing. And I mean, there was a trick, and I don't know if I'm going to blow up any recruiters are listening, blow up their spot here, but I was sitting in the office one day, and he was calling, the recruiter was making cold calls to students' homes. He had like a list of local students from the school. And he said the trick he does is he would call, and if a parent answered, you don't say, hello, this is Staff Sergeant so-and-so from the recruiter's office. May I speak to your son? They say, hey, is Billy home? Or whoever. And then they go, oh yeah, hold on a second. And the parent just thinks it's a friend
because they think
school.
It's their friend. Yeah, and I don't know who this person is, but it must be my son's friend.
Right. Yeah. And they bypass the parents right to them. So there's all this. That's a way to get these, people who might not have other ideas or plans or otherwise desperate might be the wrong word, but in need of some service or something, in need of something that the military says, well, if you come join us and sign away your rights for so
there's this reward incentive that really is going to stick out to you.
Yeah.
Well, like you're saying, this whole Monday through Friday thinking that you're going to have the training, then go out clubbing. I mean, that already to me sounds far-fetched. But what I did want to ask though is you did then go, after your 2 deployments, then you went to get a creative writing degree. Is that what happened, Zach?
No, no, not at
Oh
all.
no.
I don't have a creative writing degree. I have an associate's in general studies from a local community college.
That's wonderful. No, I mean,
I
I
think,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
even
I
more, um, kudos to you.
Thank
And
you.
so like having a debut novel out, like
Yeah.
that you
I
can
well,
do it.
I've always liked writing, and writing in English was my strong suit. Math and is absolutely not. Um, I wrote a lot when I was a kid. So I first started writing in elementary school. Like I said, Jurassic Park was like the first book that blew my mind away because it came out. The movie came out in '93. I was, I think, like 10 years old. I was 10 years old. Just see what I mean? Math. I had to think about that for a sec. But it was just it. I was just enamored by this idea of taking the speculative scenario that and just imagining what happens, and I spent a lot of years writing just because I wanted to. Then adulthood gets in the way, sort of, the frivolous things like using your imagination, writing and playing an instrument or something, things that don't directly, you know, help you towards a career, kind of get put on the back burner. But I'd still, over the years, I would always get this urge to write something, whether it was a page or an idea or a character sketch or something. And the drive was always there. Then some years later, after I got out of the army, I bounced around a little bit, and I spent a good number of years kind of making a lot of bad decisions and not doing anything to make my life any easier. Um, and it took me a while to get my head on right. And then I met my wife, and we moved in together, and my life sort of started to come back on track, and I found peace, and that's when I started going to school. And as when I went to school, I thought I was going to be like Billy Madison, I don't know, I was 25 or something when I went to class, but I thought I was going to be old, or 26, 27. But I, when I have to start writing papers and things, I realized I still had an ability to do that, or I felt comfortable doing that, and I could get better at it. And so I started to write creatively again, just for the fun of it. And I got to a point where I thought maybe I'll just write something, print it off at Staples, put it on the shelf, and that'll be fun. In pursuing skill in the craft, that's when I started, following authors and writers on social media, and listening to interviews and going to conventions, and learning that it was a skill you can develop. And somewhere along the way, I wish I could pinpoint the exact moment, but I don't know if it was an exact moment. But I realized, well, why don't I see if I could try to write something that someone will notice? Someone, instead of just print it off at Staples, put it on the shelf, and grandkids read it one day and go, oh yeah, that's cool. Maybe this could happen. So I started doing that, and lo and behold, the long journey, here we are, Wake of War is finally out. And
Wow.
it still blows my mind when I walk into like Barnes and Noble or Books a Million,
And
or
you see it.
bookstore and there's, it's wild.
Mhm.
It's wild.
Yeah, well, and I know there's this like really cute, quaint bookstore in your town in Eastern Connecticut that you
Mhm.
post like Instagram photos of, and I'm like, oh, look how it's just like adorable, almost farmhouse type
Yeah.
bookstore. It looks like,
I-
but yeah,
yeah,
now you
that's
live like in a farming kind of town, very quiet. So you're living your Northeast country
mhm,
life.
mhm,
But I think it's um so I actually started at a county college because I got a full ride there from my high school. Like in New Jersey, we have a scholarship program that, like, if
nice.
you place in such a percentage of your high school class, you can go to county college for free. So, like, I started there. Then I went to my undergrad in North Jersey at a state school, and then went into my PhD. Um, but I always attribute my associate's degree time to meeting some of the most just varied people of all different backgrounds.
Mhm,
Or even when I went to my state public university in New Jersey, I met a lot of actually veterans, um, who, worked with, I forget if it's veteran affairs on campus, but the office,
mhm,
to like talk about what kind of courses they're going to be taking, and like just the whole perspective of even an adult learner. I learned so much from. So like I think it's important, Zach, that you talk about, you know, how that kind of helped you. Like you didn't need the associate's degree to learn to put out the writing, but it seems like it kind of helped you figure out the pathway of what you were going to write, and like
yeah.
the craft of.
Right.
the genre, so to
For
speak.
sure. Yeah. It was like an exercise in confidence, I guess.
Mm.
Because I spent, and this is a problem, something I've done my whole life without realizing, but I never thought that, like, I still can't believe I'm a career firefighter. Like, something like that is the kind of thing that when I was younger, there were people like, oh, you know what, this job would be great for you, or this kind of thing. I think you should look into that, like, but I always thought that was for the other kids. That was for other people from stable households with the right upbringing, and someone like me who's, just barely getting by. That's not a future for me. Even going to college wasn't a thing for me. I didn't take my SATs. I didn't work hard in school. And then the end of senior year started coming around, and I was like, oh shit, now what am I going to do? And it took me a while to realize that that's not, you'll manifest what you believe, right? If you believe you can't do it, then, what's that lame quote, right? If you think you can or you can't, you're right. And it's true. It's lame, but it's true. Like, if you don't try and you don't put the effort in, you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe that it's something you can do, and give it your best shot. And it certainly was, it at least set my mind frame right. The idea, because I got out of the military and I was just kind of floating around, just living. I had a job, not a career. I had a job. I made just enough money to barely pay all my bills every month. And there were always bills that would have to get pushed to the next month, which would delay another one until another one. It was just barely getting by. But I had, when I decided that things needed to change, or I found a new headspace, and my outlook on life changed, I started working towards something better. And I still to this day do that. Like I wrote Wake of War, and my next book's in my editor. I'm trying to get better at writing, and I'm writing the third book, and I want to get better at that. And
That's
every day at
exciting.
work, like I try to, maybe I know how to do a thing, but how can I do it better? How can I stay sharp on it? How can I just try to stay positive and always improve, just keep the edge sharp, and
stay in this empowered space, which
it
could be easier for some people than others depending on their circumstances. But like something though I did want to touch upon that you mentioned briefly is well, first I just want to ask, do you think the Zac who entered the military like right after high school would be having the same kind of talk with me right now than the Zac who's now here, years later, and with all these different experiences you've had? Like, how different of a Zac? Not that you're different, but I mean, the same can be said of me too, and my experiences. But do you feel like your mindset? It seems like there was a shift, even though you were still really passionate about writing. Like, and I'm sure you read a lot when you were in the military or deployed, even with literature. See, that would be me. I would be like the bookish person in the military.
Oh, well,
Like, just
I would
leave
sit
me
in
in
my
the
bunk.
corner.
That's exactly what I did. I'd sit in the bunk like, hey, you want to go check out, the bay or do something? No, and I would just lay in my cot and read a book, because that was the time where the little portable DVD players, and you have to get the bootleg DVD to watch a movie. But yeah, I've always liked reading. Whatever it was, I would read. Yep. The Zac, it's funny because when I think about Zac from myself at that age, I picture myself as I am now, right? Clearly it's not true. I mean, I'm creeping closer and closer to 40 years old these days, and it's just, some people, I guess it's a matter of perspective. That Zac is not the Zac who I am now, but at the same time, who I am now is directly informed and inspired by the things I went through at that age, right? And maybe I'll look back at that person and who he was and how he acted. It's like, and I cringe at some of the things, but somehow it all ended up, it got me here. And I'm, I don't know that I could or would change it. I mean, who knows, very different, obviously. And for a number of reasons, I think, besides just general age and maturity and life experience. But, like we were just talking about, that to see things differently, to know that, like, if you want to do something, you do it. You try to make it work, just stay, like you said, that positive mind space or headspace, that place of empowerment, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot to, I'm sure we
there's
could
a lot
spend
to
days
unpack there
unpacking the
psychologically. Yeah.
the
I mean,
mess.
and do you have like 10 more minutes? It's okay if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't,
absolutely.
Zach. Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Just because, this is like a shout out to the audience, but
Oh, great. Yeah, yeah.
like I always hold like some as bonus material for our Patreon, which, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. There's the promo for it. But, okay, well, that's good. I want to just dig in because there's something else that happens so much in your novel that you even expressed about like coming the experience after. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, in your case, it's the experience after being deployed. Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. This is Andrew Rimby. I really hope you follow us on social media because that's where you get to see all of the exciting video clips, teasers, and humorous moments. So follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Ivory Tower Boiler Room and on our Twitter at Ivory Boiler Room. I hope you all are following the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe and become a member for only $5. You get all of our interviews and episodes ad-free. You also get to watch the video interviews. You get to see my lovely face and the guest's lovely face. And you get access to all the bonus episodes. So Dr. Jake Newsom talking about the history of the Pink Triangle, Zac Topping talking about being an Army vet and what that meant when he wrote a war novel and a dystopian novel. You get to hear Gregory Maguire's breaking news about the Wicked movie musical, Jesse Green talking about Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, and what did Stephen Sondheim actually think about Rodgers and Hammerstein. So head to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Please, please provide me an iced coffee. I would love it because I need to stay up to do all these edits. So yeah, see you all in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe. And here is Mary DePippi from True Crime and Academia.
Hi, everyone. I am Mary DePippi. As Andrew said, I am the host of True Crime and Academia. True Crime and Academia airs on Fridays at 7:30. Now, to find all things True Crime and Academia, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at True Crime and Academia or on Twitter at TC and Academia because, well, they hate it when you have too many characters. Like I said, True Crime and Academia airs on Fridays at 7:30. But if you are a subscriber, you get a bonus episode. That's right, a whole episode just to yourselves that no one else gets to hear. Like, I do a deep dive on the case of JonBenet Ramsey. I deep dive Casey Anthony. We talk about the history of the lobotomy. And most recently, we talked about the Night Stalker himself, Richard Ramirez. So if you want to access all of that extra wonderful content, go to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And like Andrew said, if you could just please buy us a nice coffee, that would be great. That would be really, really great.
It would be great. We appreciate it. We also interact with all of you on Patreon. So ask us your insightful questions. We will answer them for you. And we want to thank our Spring 23 interns, Andrea, Caitlin, Rosie, and Sheila. Thank you so much. And we can't wait to see you all back again in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Happy winter, everyone.